Good morning, everybody. We're going to have a look at BEPRO, and I know what you're going to say. Yeah, some love it, some hate it. I'm kind of in the middle of it. I'm trying to make the most out of trading these days, and we watched this on the way down. This is something that I was saying, look, there's a coin here which has previously gone absolutely ballistic. We want a little piece of that, and so when the correction was taking place throughout May, we were watching it drop and die off and die off and die off. And I was saying, look, this is in the crosshairs. There was three coins. I'm not going to call them by their naughty names. I don't want people to get too upset. People don't like me saying those things, so we'll call it small cap. Shall we? We'll just call it small cap coins. There was three of them at the time: OMI, VRA, and BEPRO. Now they all did work out to an extent, but BEPRO definitely the underperformer of the group. VRA being the best. Even though it's retraced by a large amount, we took profit on it twice and let the rest ride, so it's still all good. It's still being up significantly now from our entry point, which was below a cent. But BEPRO, well, OMI is like pretty good. It's slow and steady, wins the race. It's actually up now. In comparison to all of these, it's actually held its value the best. Although it's not made the most, it's still over 100% from the entry point now. But poor old BEPRO couldn't do any of that, and I think there's reasons for it. So BEPRO basically was subject to this FOMO, we'll call it, because the thing that turned me on to it, or not even that turned me on, but the thing that introduced me to it was I've got friends of mine who like to trade meme stocks, right? So they refuse to do TA or learn TA, even though they've been in the game for a while now, years in fact. They just don't do it, whether they don't understand it or they don't have the time or they're unwilling to learn. They just don't do it. So what they do instead is they join Reddit, Twitter, TikTok, any of that sort of stuff, and they wait for some FOMO to start, and then they go crazy and they FOMO into it, right? So I mean, that is pretty deadly. It's something I would never do. But they were telling me, be pro or be broke. That's what they were telling me as they were buying into it at like 2.5, 3 cents, saying it's definitely going to go to 50 cents, which is obviously that's the kind of thing that keeps people in on a meme stock. I'm not saying this is a meme stock or a meme coin. I'm just saying that this is what drove this last big push up, and which has led to this what would appear to be poor performance since. Now, I use the analogy sometimes, which is that, when a party begins, you start off with a few beers, and then if you want to take it to the next level, you take something a bit stronger, and then if you're at a 3-day festival, you really do need to, keep pushing this stuff into your body, otherwise you're going to come down and have a hangover. But after, let's just say you've been at Glastonbury for 3 days and you've been non-stop partying, eventually you're going to have to come down, and the hangover, it's in the post. You can't avoid the hangover. It's going to get you at some point. And the bigger the party, usually the bigger hangover, especially if you've been using naughty substances that you shouldn't be doing, like meme stocks, which don't represent the chart. The technicals here don't match the move, okay? And so the hangover has been pretty savage and severe. Doesn't mean that there can't be some, some decent moves afterwards. This is why we were looking at it in the first place. In May, when everything was coming down, I was like, this is one of the ones I'm going to keep an eye on, similar to VRA and OMI. But I also said I'm not going to try and buy or try and guess the bottom on this one, because it could be pretty deadly. It gives a false impression if you measure the top to, I suppose, the absolute bottom around here. That's 95%. You see that 95% retracement. So for some people they might go, well, it's 95% retrace. It can't come down any further than that. But actually, if you put it on log scale, it certainly can. It certainly can. It gives the illusion that it can't come down further until you put it on log scale, and then you see, all right, so we came down to this support and we held, but then we broke down. Okay, so we came down to here. This is where we bounced from. Where's the next level of support? Well, you could argue that it's down here, or maybe even down here, which means that if you tried to catch the knife, let's just say you caught a knife successfully on this absolute low wick here, and then it came down to this support, that's a further 63% retracement. That would have been an area of decent support, and then if that didn't work out, a further 77 from this low. So this is what I'm saying when I talk about something like this being potentially warranting that word that people take such great offence to, is because the risk is enormous, right? And when you're dealing with something that's already retraced by 95% and still threatens to come down as much as another 77%, that is pretty deadly stuff, right? Luckily, though, for those who bought the bottom, so somebody did, obviously, otherwise it wouldn't have moved, they were pretty much instantly rewarded with about a 400% move from here to here. And then a further peak up to here were about 576. Now, I didn't obviously buy that bottom. And I said, look, I'm not looking to buy into this until it starts to show some kind of signs of improvement. We got a rally up, we got a retest, another rally up, retest. So I bought it around about these zones, right? Recognize that obviously the areas that I've bought it from are down now. So actually this has been a bit of a losing trade for me overall. I didn't take any profit on this, unlike I did with VRA and things, because I just didn't take any profit on it, okay? So I'm still hoping that this is going to work out. Now, when it comes to risk to reward, especially when we're looking at markets like what we are right now, and people are calling for bear markets and things like this, I'm really not feeling the bear market at all. The bear market scenario is not relevant at this stage for Bitcoin. Just is not. It doesn't match the technicals, doesn't match the chart in any way. In fact, the only thing that matches the chart is what we've said from the outset, which is that I said, look, the virus is coming out. It's like a carbon copy of March. I think there's a very good chance that we'll get one of these, and we got one. And then as soon as that happened, I said, right, there's three things that are likely to happen here. Okay, first, most likely is that we will accumulate between 49,000 and 40,000. This is going to be an accumulation range, and this is what we've got currently so far, coming down to that bottom side of the range there, and matching what I would say the most likely scenario playing out. Second most likely was a V-shaped recovery. Third most likely, or should we call it the least likely, is a bear market. So at the moment we're playing out the most likely scenario, which is an accumulation between this zone, 40,000 and 49,000, just give or take, right? So give or take. So as we approach the bottom, that's where I bought my Bitcoin again. So scaling into it at around 40,600, I believe, was my entry. And we're in this descending channel. We've broken out of that so far, back into accumulation. So this looks like it wants to at least retest the top of the range, 46,500 area, potentially maybe more, maybe a little less, but basically up to these zones, 45 to 46. That's I think where we're going to go next, right? Don't think we're going to break down into a bear market. And so with that in mind, is there opportunity in some of these small cap coins? Well, I don't know if you've noticed in the market, but the top cap altcoins are the ones that seem to be catching the most relevant moves. The small caps aren't really moving. And you can see on Kucoin, I don't know if you've noticed, but on Kucoin and these smaller exchanges with these smaller cap coins, they're not really doing a great deal. In fact, their chart structures are pretty awful. There's nothing really endearing about them. There's not really any signs of life on them. But there could be if we think about Bitcoin being the overall indicator. So I said this back a few days ago when we were coming down to my buy zone of about 40,000 or so. I said, look, I think we're going to get a bounce here, and we can use Bitcoin as an indicator for the overall market, which should bounce also. But on the live stream last week, when we were getting that bounce, I said, look, we got the bounce. This is what I was saying I think is most likely going to happen. We're getting the bounce, and the bounce is being carried across the board for all altcoins. But it could just be a bounce. So let's not get too excited. It's Bitcoin that's driving the market at the moment. So Bitcoin's bouncing. It would appear to have bottomed, in my opinion, or found a bottom-ish area. And the market is getting some relief out of it, but it may not continue. It might just be a bounce. And so far, it does appear that for a lot of these coins, especially these small cap coins, that certainly was just a bounce. The bounces were pretty good, though. We managed to get in on VRA, got a 40% bounce out of that one. There were some decent bounces, so let's not underestimate the power of these bounces. But it hasn't transferred into uptrends for a lot of these coins. For some of the top cap coins, it looks like uptrends are beginning, but these small cap coins are not the case. But if we're thinking about Bitcoin as being the overall indicator accumulating between those zones, then that would suggest that the lows could very likely be in for some of these coins, including BEPRO. And so if we're looking at BEPRO's chart, we recognize that it's coming down to an area of support on its tether pairing, but not just that. If we go to its Bitcoin pairing, there is also a very interesting portion of support down here as well. So we'll just measure this out from these wick lows. We also have corresponding lows on the Bitcoin pair over here, corresponding lows over here as well, and also corresponding lows all the way over here until it gets to the point where this chart goes silly because it came on the market with such stupidity. So But again, false sense of security. There is a lot of support around this zone. You can see that, it's very clear. But we can also see that it did break down from here quite nastily to the tune of about 90%. So, what does this mean? It means that there's risk, massive risk. What we also see though, we've got a consolidation basically in play. We're below all major moving averages. We've been driven down to a potential area of, we'll call it a super support, but let's not go crazy. And let's just say we just play out for the bounce to the top of the descending wedge here, the descending triangle formation here. It's a 50% move versus Bitcoin if it were to do that. Let's just say today. It's unlikely to do that today, but this is an area of support versus Bitcoin. And this is a triangle formation that can give and offer a measured move. We'll just look at that like this. And again, this would only be relevant if and when we break out. So let's say we break out towards the end of the apex. It would launch us towards a previous high. Not an all-time high, but our previous high over here. Talking about getting close to about 4,000 sats. So we'll call it 3,500 sats. I know that it's not 3,500 because Kucoin like to add extra decimals, but that's what we see here. So I'm going to reference it as 3,500 sats as suggested on the Kucoin chart, right? So let's all just calm down. I know it's not actually that much, but that's what it says. So we're going to go with that figure for obvious reasons, because that's the number stated, right? Okay, all right. So what are we going to do then? Are we going to buy or are we going to wait? Well, I really wouldn't fault you for doing either, to be honest. For me personally, I feel as though the lows are likely close, and so with them being close, it might be okay to try to enter in at the bottom of this support, despite being in a descending triangle which is bearish. And we've done this before and we've broken down from these because technically these are bearish formations. The support is static, the resistance continues to push down, which is why every single day you get diminishing returns on what could take place within the triangle. You're hoping that it breaks out, but there's every chance that it won't and that we break down. And to be honest with you, statistically, I think it's more likely that it would break down. And again, if we talk about this in the form of where we could go after this, it could be pretty devastating, especially when we reference the last time we broke down from this major support, which was over here. It was devastating. So it could be devastating, or it could be very rewarding. So if we go to the lower term time frames, just for fun, all right, just for fun, is there any buy signals brewing on this one on the hourly? Hourly's approaching a peak already on the money flow index. Again, this is just with this Bitcoin pair. You're trading with less than a Bitcoin in a 24-hour period. It's not really going to show you a great deal. And we're getting rejections from the 200 exponential, which is coming in currently at about just short of 1,000 sats and descending, right? Hourly not looking too promising. We also have the 2 hourly, again nothing too promising on here. There are signals on the Itchy Cloud that are kind of trying to brew, but unless we either go up or stay sideways for maybe a week or so, it's not going to generate any buy signals. And if you're not going to get those buy signals on the hourly or the 2 hourly, you're not going to get them on any other time frame. So the only thing we've got going for this is that support, which dates back. Well, how far does it date back? Couple of years? I think it probably is a couple of years, isn't it? I mean, it's hard to say because of that stupid entry. But I suppose the support is relevant all the way back down here. So we're talking March 2020. So yeah, it's going back quite a while, getting on for a best part of 2 years then. So a strong support versus sats might be enough to hold it at this level, and maybe it can either move up to the top of the channel and break out, or at least go sideways and break out slowly. But again, there's no buy signals on here. The volume's extremely low. It would be what we call on this channel fuck it money or screw it money. That's basically what it is. It's screw it money. And because we had a decent reaction from this level in the past, this essentially missed out on the biggest portion of the rally, being the conservative trader that I was, only buying in after a retest of some of these moving averages, because I didn't want it to give a false read and break down further, incurring a 70 or more % loss. I didn't want that. So there is always that. to be concerned about that this trade's next to zero. The hangover could still be in play. There was a little bit of light relief, but it wasn't much. It wasn't. I mean, it was pretty big. Let's face it, but it wasn't enough to change the overall view of this chart, which is still in a giant consolidation, a nasty one, driven by the hangover, the massive hangover, which BEPRO is still currently in. But have we slept it off? Or do we need a little lie-in? That's the question. I think, to be honest with you, if we were looking at this chart being a healthy chart, we'd need a little lie-in first, and maybe slowly stirring, getting out of bed, having some healthy breakfast, and starting a better uptrend than these silly, massive, big moves. Something a bit more slow and sustaining to gradually break this chart from the way that it looks. If we think about the RSI here, there is a massive consolidation of our RSI from back down here as well, and even though we are approaching oversold areas, we could easily come back down to oversold areas again. We inevitably will find our way out of here given an RSI breakout. But the question is, the RSI doesn't reference the actual price, just references the momentum, and the momentum is slowly but continuously dropping off bit by bit by bit by bit, and it's only when we get an RSI breakout along with price action that we can start to get excited again. I don't think we're going to get one of those anytime soon, but if you wanted to scale in this time, bit by bit scale into BEPRO might be the most cautious and sensible way to go about picking it up, rather than going all in at this support, which could easily break down because we've already established on this Bitcoin pairing that actually it does give a false sense of security. It looks okay, it looks strong when you go back in time, but you turn the log scale on, you realise that actually it's not that sensible of an idea, because the lows are significantly lower than this. And so if it does break down from this level, it gets pretty nasty. But you got to be in it to win it, I suppose. You got to be in it to win it. And when you're trying to dabble in micro altcoins like this one that have had a pretty poor performance, generally speaking, and when I talk about poor performance, I'm talking about natural performance. This is not natural to begin with, and then it's just made lower highs, lower lows thereafter. It doesn't look so bad. It doesn't match that when you look at it for its Bitcoin pair, but it does when you see it here. I mean, this is horrendous, and so far it's not been able to create any different chart structure. So there's what we're looking to do, if anything, is to buy a low, a potential bottom or a bottom area. When we're talking about a coin which can move hundreds of % up, a bottom area does run the risk of losing 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70% before it even finds its bottom, and it may not ever do it. Remember, volume is poor on this, momentum is still dwindling, price action is still declining. So if you want it, I would suggest be careful with it, be prepared to not see anything, maybe ever, but maybe not anything in between now and what I think might be April to May, where this momentum could at least get to a point where it's so low that it has no choice to break out. But that, the price of BEPRO at that point could be anything. I, for one, feel like it's worth scaling a small portion here based on its sats and its tether pairing, both coming down to a support level, or what would appear to be a relevant one. I wouldn't say it's a massively strong one, but it's a relevant one, which might lead to BEPRO having at least a decent bounce on the next bounce. But like I say, let's not get too excited. Let's not hope for the moon. I know lots of people think of BEPRO of something very special, but it may end up being something special in the future. I don't know anything about the tech, but when it comes to on a chart basis, you could buy what would be seen as a potential, significant support, but it could easily break down. So just bear all that in mind. Over time, if the market doesn't break down to a bear market, this should start to turn around March, April, May, and maybe go into an actual uptrend of its own by that point. Until then, you're speculating on the bottoms and the lows, which is fine to do. It just means that you'll be lucky, or you'd be hoping that you'd get instant gratification from that trade, whereas I don't think you will. I don't think there's no instant gratification unless it's just a bounce which will be carried by the market. We've got to get out of this consolidation first, then we can talk about an uptrend beginning or general accumulation beginning. But until that, It's deadly. So I'll leave it with you there. But thanks for watching, guys. Hope you have a nice day. Take it easy.